Chemical irritants come in three, for the most part, they come in three forms. On the right side, we see is a fog coming out of a canister, and that's usually deployed via a heat method. On the left side is a spray, and then there's one other one of the pepper balls, similar to the paintballs. They contain a dry powder from pepper, from the OC to pepper stuff. The actual delivery system that these chemicals get deployed in come in four different methods. There's a stream, which for the most part will be a liquid, as in the spray. If you have somebody spraying pepper spray on you, it is a liquid. It is not a powder. It is a liquid. Powders do not spray very well. It comes out as a liquid. There is the fog, which usually comes out of the canister. It gets deployed via grenade type launcher. It gets shot at a couple of 100 feet down the road, and then the heat causes the fog to come out of the canister, and that fog carries within it the chemicals that cause irritation. Then there's a foam or a gel hybrid, which is not very often used in the United States. It's mostly used in Europe and Asia. From the foam gel hybrids, for the most part, will be shot out of a large vehicle, kind of like a fire truck, except it's not going to be a fire truck, but it has a really large nozzle on the roof, and it shoots a foam or a gel at very, very far, at fairly far targets, quite a few 100 feet, and it'll coat everything and anything under the sun. And the last one is the pellet, which is actually a solid, the powder, but it's still a solid. Those are the four delivery systems of chemical agents that are used commonly today. When we go into chemical agents, there's mostly three different types. And just for the record, we're going to get to the QA session every once in a while, and we'll stop every couple of slides and we'll answer questions that come up. So just hang with us. But somebody asked again, what are the three? What are the three? The three are these two plus the little paintball type pellets that get shot out. But we have three, for the most part, we have three chemicals out there that come out. There's a couple of other ones that are not really used in the United States, and we'll go from least to most used nowadays. The least used is CN gas. CN gas is the highest toxicity, and it is the most controlled by the federal government in the United States. In fact, you cannot use anything more than 2% concentration. Anything beyond that is considered highly dangerous. So it's fairly well controlled by the federal government, and it is also the most toxic of all the three chemicals that are commonly in use. Therefore, it is the least used chemical out there. So it was originally known as mace. So it was invented, I believe, in the 1920s, if memory serves me correctly, under the brand name of mace. And mace, however, now mace is interchangeable with CS. Some people call CS gas mace and vice versa. CN gas is a gas. There's no other way about it. It's not a solid, it's not an oil, it is a gas. It's something that floats in the air, and in of itself, for the most part, it is invisible. CS gas is commonly what's known as tear gas. However, some people call it mace. On the other hand, tear gas is also sometimes mixed with pepper spray. So CS gas in of itself is a gas. It is, in its pure form, it is pure tear gas. It is the most common type of gas used by law enforcement agency or law enforcement officers. It is primarily deployed via canister, meaning they will deploy a canister, one of those canisters that we showed you in the first photo, a couple of 100 feet down the road, whether it's through a shotgun type device or bazooka, whatever they call those things, or they will just throw out a grenade type device on the ground, and then it'll, in the internal combustion, there's two chemicals in it, and when combined, when they release the trigger after 5 seconds or whatever the delay is, it will cause internal combustion, which will heat up, which will cause the gas to escape from the little canister via heat, and it'll come out in a fog. Can be deployed via pellet, but extremely rare to do so because it will dissipate really, really quick. So it's not really done that way. The canister deployment requires heat to dissipate it, and that comes in handy later. We have to remember that the canister that the CS gas comes out of is very, very hot. There's a chemical burning that's going on internally to that canister, which is the only method of the gas escaping. The gas is not escaping because it's under pressure. If it was under pressure and we just puncture it, all the gas would escape a second or two and that would be over. The gas actually escapes and becomes potent because of the heat, which causes it to expand, and various other chemical reactions. Again, and also tear gas is a gas. It is not a solid. It's not a liquid. It's a gas. It is incorrectly referred to as mace. Not that it matters, because the labels don't really matter. They're highly interchangeable. It's just simply for the record, so we know what we're talking about. The reason it sometimes will matter is there are law enforcement agencies, when they will put out the call, if you listen to a scanner or something along those lines, they will call them correctly. They will call it out that they're deploying tear gas or they're deploying pepper spray or so on and so forth. So if you hear somebody on a scanner from official sources saying that they are deploying tear gas, they are deploying tear gas. If you hear them saying they're going to deploy pepper spray, they are deploying pepper spray. Pepper spray is the newest kid on the block, and it is becoming more and more common. However, pepper spray is not used very much at great distances. So anything more than 30 to 50 feet, pepper spray is not going to be used very much. Pepper spray is mostly used for close quarters when there's a skirmish line, and whoever's the or one-on-one altercation or confrontation, and one party is trying to subdue the second party and they're face to face. That's when pepper spray is going to be used. Or there's a skirmish line and the line is marching up trying to get the people on the other side to disperse. Pepper spray is very easily used. It acts much faster than tear gas. It'll hit you quicker, it'll hit you harder. Good news is pepper spray is not as toxic as tear gas is. So pepper spray is primarily deployed as a spray. It is aerosolized in water via propylene glycol emulsification. So it's a oil-based product. If it comes out from a spray, it is an oil-based product that is suspended in water. So the pepper particles are suspended in oil, and that oil mixture in itself is suspended in water. The reason being because oil is really hard to spray. The viscosity of oil is much greater than water. Water is easier to spray, so that's why they use it. It's an oil-based product, but we use the water to propel it greater distances. It can be deployed via pellet, and every once in a while you'll have somebody shot with a pepper spray ball. And that what happens is when that pellet hits you anywhere on the body, it will burst and it will create a little cloud of pepper in your face or coat your clothing, and you'll inhale it and it'll hurt. It is not a gas. Pepper spray is in absolutely no uncertain circumstance. It is not a gas. It is particulate. It is a solid that is suspended in a liquid. 99% of the time, or pretty much 100% of the time, it's going to be an oil-based liquid unless it comes out of a pellet. Tear gas, CS gas and CN gas, meaning mace and tear gas, when they come out in their gas form, they will also be oil-based. There's a little slightly less oil and slightly different types of oil, but the way they deploy those gases is also going to be in an oil base so that it doesn't dissipate as quickly, so that it hangs out in the general vicinity a little bit longer. For if it was simply a pure gas and the slightest breeze would completely blow it away, and that is not what we want, or that is not what law enforcement wants. They want it to hang out for a bit. So there is some oil mixed in, and that oil, when it heats up, is what you see the fog. It comes out similar to a fog machine. Fog machine is actually somewhat of an oil-based, so there's some mineral oils in there. It works on the same concept. There's 3 levels of contamination. Actually, before I go into this, I'll answer. We have 2 questions on the board. What are the 3 again? We answered those. We answered that question. The first question is, one of the local PDs stated that they have sponge rounds. Which type would that be? I do not know. I've never heard of sponge rounds. Locally here, we had sponge rounds deployed, meaning that there's a little sponge propellant, but they did not have any irritants on it. Those were deployed, and the sponge projectiles were shot. People were shot with the sponge projectiles locally. I got my hands on one, and those did not seem to have any sort of chemical irritant on them. It might be that they will coat them at one day in the future, but as of right now, locally, I have not seen any sponge rounds that have any chemical irritants on them. I think this, from what I saw locally in the past week, when the sponge rounds were deployed, they were there to stun people, not cause less harm and less damage, but still to get people's attention. Hey, there's somebody shooting at you. You should vacate the area, which is what they want. But we're going to take a step back here and switch sides. So the next 3 or 4 slides come from the law enforcement side of view. This is the training that is provided to law enforcement agencies and organizations from the manufacturers of these chemical agents. I got all of these, the next 3, 4 slides from the companies that make these products, and I figured if this is what they teach to the folks that are deploying it, we should know this as well. So we're going to look at it from that side. Some of this stuff is very useful, and most of it is all of it is useful. Some of it is applicable to how we deal with if we get contaminated or how we treat somebody who was contaminated. So they have 3 levels of contamination. There's a direct contamination, as if you get hit directly in the face with a pepper spray. That is a level 1 contamination. If you are standing right next to a canister and it lands on your feet and it starts hissing up right into your face, that is a level 1 contamination. If you are 7 to 10 feet away from a canister, if you are 5 feet away from the pepper spray and it is not aimed directly at your face, that is considered a level 2 contamination. Anything less than a level 2 contamination, but you still get irritated, is a level 3 contamination. So if you're walking a half a block or a couple 100 feet away from where the actual irritant was deployed, and you still feel your throat getting a little itchy, or your face starts to get itchy, or your eyes start rubbing, your eyes start running, you have, at the minimum, you have a level 3 contamination. You might have a level 2 contamination. For level 3 contamination, the easiest way to decontaminate is get out of the area. You have a microscopic or less than any decent amount of irritants on you, and if you move out of the area, you'll be less impacted by it. You're not going to be. It's not going to continue to hurt you as much. For level 2 contamination and for level 1 contamination, the first thing I would do is get them out of the way and then start treating them. But it's good to know, if you go out there and you treat people, it's good to know if you have somebody, if you'll have 100 people on level 3 contamination, you'll have 7 to 10 or 15 people on level 2 contamination, and then you'll have 3 people on level 1 contamination. Keep that in the back of our head as to what we want to treat first, second, and third. We always want to treat the level 1 contamination first, because that will do the most damage. They are directly impacted. The projectile landed right on their skin, right directly on their clothing. And that's what we need to take care of, because this chemical, just like with any other chemical burn, it is a burn. It will keep burning. If it's a level 1 contamination, it will keep burning until you get rid of it. The good thing is most of these chemicals are not very long lasting. The CN gas lasts a little bit longer. It'll last about up to 30, 45 minutes. CS gas will only last about 20 minutes, and pepper spray, depending on the severity of it, on the concentration that is, will last about 15 minutes or so. After that, it starts diminishing in its potency. Again, we'll get to the QA sessions in a few minutes. We'll go through this real quick. So what is tear gas? And then actually that applies to CN and CS gas. Again, this slide specifically comes from the folks that make this stuff. This is what they give to law enforcement. So we're going to go through this. Tear gas is actually an aerosol. It can be mixed with pepper spray. Improperly or maliciously fired canisters will cause the following: many injuries, and we need to always keep, if a canister is deployed, we have to keep in the back of our head that a thermal burn can occur. If a canister lands on somebody, if they got hit with a canister and they fell down and a canister lands on them, that is an active burn that's going on their chest. If the canister lands on their chest, that canister is going to be, I think, 311 degrees Fahrenheit or so, or probably more, but at the minimum, it'll be 311 Fahrenheit, and it will continue to burn. It will cause first, second, and possibly third-degree burns, depending on how long it takes stays. So if a canister lands on somebody, or remove that canister, do not do so with your bare hands. They will burn your fingers. Canisters can cause contusions. I've seen it many times. They definitely will cause bone fractures if you hit the rib cage properly. Lacerations, not that common, but it can happen. Avulsions and concussions, also less common, but they can happen. Canisters, the point of the canister is for it to land on the ground, not on somebody. If it lands on the ground, it'll start deploying fog and it'll keep rolling for another couple of feet, so you can cover a much wider area. Whereas if it hits a person or an object, it stops right there, it lands on the ground, and the amount of square feet that gets covered is a little bit less. So honestly, the goal of the canister is to get it to roll on the ground once it starts deploying a little bit. CS is done in low concentration for tear gas. Low concentration, you'll get a burning sensation in your mouth, nose, and in the eyes. You'll have increased mucus production and in coughing. Moderate concentration is everything just escalates the same symptoms and signs. They just escalate. Only if and more higher concentrations, you're going to have forced closure of the eyes. You might have eye twitching and vomiting, tachycardia, dizziness, syncope, and many other respiratory symptoms that come along with that. Pepper spray is a water, oil, or gel-like spray. It will be, every single time it will be oil-based, but it can come out from various different, the vessel that holds the carrier of the actual peppers are going to be various substances, but they will always be, the pepper itself will always be infused in an oil base, and that oil base can either be in of itself, it can be suspended in water, or in a gel type spray that'll come out and hit you. Some agencies are using paintball-like pepper spray. If they want to do it from a little bit further away, like 50 feet away, they'll use paintball type devices. However, the paintball type devices, as we know, can only hit 1 or 2 people at a time. Whereas a spray, you can do a wide arc. If you're 7 to 10 feet away from a line, you can get the whole line with a single spray. And we've all seen the videos of UC Davis, what happened up there with that. Pepper spray, and again, this is taught to law enforcement. It is absolutely meant to be sprayed into the eyes and the face. That is their goal. That is what they're going to aim for. That is what they want. That's where it's going to do the most damage. The reason for that is it will incapacitate the individual and it will force compliance and or dispersion. And we'll get into how that works in a moment. The effects of pepper spray are severe pain. Again, if we go back to the tear gas a moment earlier, it was mild pain. Pepper spray will cause severe pain really, really quickly. The good thing is pepper spray is pepper spray will last least amount of time than from all the others, but it will hit you the hardest. And again, pepper spray will increase nasal mucus production, eye spasms, coughing, and the symptoms will last 15 to 30 minutes. And on the high side, it'll be 15 to 30 minutes. Within 15 minutes, the symptoms should start going away. So the pain should start going away. Pepper spray is, I'm not going to read off the board. You guys can read it for yourself. But the reason I bring this up is that, again, this is something that gets taught to law enforcement. But the reason I put that in there is because a lot of people say pepper spray is natural. And my answer to that is pepper spray is absolutely not natural. Pepper spray is about as natural as Splenda is to sugar. It is a man-made chemical that is derived from a plant that does not make it natural. Splenda does not grow on tree, neither does pepper spray. We take something that grows on a plant and we heavily modify it via various chemical processes. We'll get pepper spray, and on the other hand, we'll get Splenda. But the point is, pepper spray is not organic. It's not non-GMO. It's none of that stuff. It is a chemical. It is not natural. It's not meant to be put on the skin. It's not meant to be put on hot dogs or chips or salsa or anything along those lines. It's not edible. It's not meant to go into the human body, period. The Sabre company makes the majority of pepper spray out there. And the only reason I put this up there is, so again, knowledge is power, and it's good for us to know that it comes in different concentrations. Not that we can do anything with this. I have no idea what the red, the 5.5, or the defense looks like. I just put it up there so that we should keep in mind that if we are in one jurisdiction in one day and we get hit with pepper spray and then we go to a second jurisdiction, it might be a different concentration. Do not treat them equally. Treat each individual application of a chemical irritant differently and of itself. You can use the treatment methods from the last time, but do not go into the scene expecting the same symptoms that you saw a week ago. or a day ago from a different agency. They all might be different, using different concentration levels, and nobody really has any idea what the concentration level is until you get hit. The psychological effects of pepper spray, and again, this is taught to the folks that deploy this, is in order of what they do, from quicker to later, or earlier to later, is fear, anxiety, panic, and hyperventilation. We should take out the word panic, but we should take out the word possible, but they kept it in there, so I'm keeping it in there. But yes, ultimately the goal is to induce fear and anxiety, which will cause people to leave the area, which is exactly what is wanted from the other side. In some people, it causes panic. In quite a few people, especially if you get a level 1 or a decent level 2 contamination, it will cause you to start hyperventilating. The physical effects of pepper spray will hit you 3 main areas, will be the eyes, the respiratory system, and the skin. And in the eyes, again, this is another training chart we get that law enforcement gets. In the eyes, it'll cause a painful burning sensation, involuntary eye closure, profound tearing, visual impairment, protracted redness, and ultimately the goal is to get somebody to close their eyes. Once any participant of any action closes their eyes, they are out of that fight for as long as their eyes are closed, which the goal is for as long as they can, or whether an arrest is done, or just a dispersion order, or they have 2 of their fellow humans carry them away. Either way, ultimately the goal is to have somebody close their eyes because it hurts. That is the ultimate goal here. On the skin, you'll have intense burning sensation, possible inflammation. If you have a lot of inflammation, you need to escalate because you have an underlying condition. You might have a reddening of the skin, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but do not treat the reddening of the skin under any circumstances at this time for any chemical. Respiratory system is the one thing we should really keep an eye out, and you'll get the inflammation of everything that's inside of the skin. So the nose, the mouth, the trachea, tongue, all of that stuff can definitely, it will definitely start producing more liquids in your mouth and your nose. You have a runny nose, you'll want to spit quite a bit. That is perfectly acceptable. Do not stop it. Do not wipe your nose. If you have a runny nose, do not wipe your nose with your forearm. Blow your nose out onto the street. If you don't have a rag, just blow it out onto the sidewalk, but don't wipe it with your forearm. If you do that, you're going to further contaminate yourself. Pronounced mucus secretion, coughing, shortness of breath, tightening of chest, those are perfectly acceptable symptoms. We expect that, and we treat those as they come. And I'm going to stop right here to answer. We have 3 questions on the board. What are suggestions for PPE for these irritants? You will need something along the lines of a P100 mask with a filter that fits that. The higher rated filters, and you can do some research online, or if you want, send us a message. We'll let you know. There's 2 filters that work really well. But for the most part, any P100 rated mask with a decent filter will work. An N95 ain't gonna do squat for any of this stuff, period. End of story. It's not gonna do it. So an N95 and you get hit with pepper spray, you might as well be wearing just a wet rag on your face. It'll do just about the same. Bear mace, what does that fall under? So bear mace is probably a brand name. You'll have to look at the ingredients as to what it is. I do not know. Bear mace might be 2% of the CN gas. I don't know what it is, but again, the federal government mandates CN gas can be used only at less than 2% potency, a 2% concentration level in the United States because it is that toxic. But that would be my guess. We can Google that if you want. I don't know, and I have no desire to buy it. What are avulsions? Yeah, well, you'll start retching, and you might want to throw up. That's you'll see that people are going to want to throw up. They're going to start coughing, and they won't be able to swallow. They won't be able to keep anything down, including their saliva. So this is a slide that very often, I brought this up, and I'm going to spend some time on this because a lot of people overlook this data. And this is data that's published by the NIH. It was published about a year and a half ago. So prior to the current civil rights actions that started. I think part of this study was done after Standing Rock. And there's a lot of there was a call after Standing Rock for a lot of studies, and I think the NIH did this study partially because of that. So, and the reason I bring this up and I put such high importance on this is we see a lot of folks out there putting out training materials and writing up papers and whatnot, for people to go, and when you treat somebody with tear gas or pepper spray, treat the eyes, keep an eye on the eyes, concentrate on the eyes. And I'm going to turn that upside on its head, and I'm going to tell all of you right now that the NIH did a study from hundreds of people, and almost 50% of the permanent injuries from pepper spray and tear gas were respiratory in nature. 32 people from the study, which is almost 50%. So the right chart is not percentages. The right chart is a number of people that they found in the United States that had permanent injuries from chemical irritants. So yes, it was only 32 people that made up almost 50%. It looks like about 48% of the permanent injuries from the chemical irritants were respiratory in nature. Permanent injuries are respiratory in nature will kill you sooner or later. It can be emphysema. It can be requiring a lung transplant. It can be many other things. It can be asthma. Either way, it is a life-altering injury. Only 4 people, which looks to be about 5 to 6%, had permanent ocular injuries. In fact, there's more people had muscular, and more people that had psychological permanent harm done from chemical irritants than had eye problems. The eyes are very good at healing themselves. They are one of the most exposed organs we have, and through the millions of years of evolutions that human beings have been on this planet, we have figured out how to heal our eyes really quick. We've all gone through, well, not all of us, but quite a few of us have gone through, whether it's a brush fire season or a forest fire season, or we've gotten something in our eye and it hurts and the eye starts tearing up and it flushes, and a day or two later, we're good to go. Some of us have gotten pink eye. It can be either a bacterial or a viral infection. And for the most part, that will heal itself. And yes, you might get some antibiotics to go along with that, but the eye will heal itself. The eye is really good at protecting itself because over the millions of years of evolution, we've come to realize that our eyes are very out in the open, and we don't have covering over them. We have eyelids, but our eyes are open in order for us to see. So they have figured out how to heal themselves. If anybody on this call has ever gotten a scratched cornea, and you go to the doctor for that, and sometimes even if you have a partially detached cornea, and you go to the doctor will tell you, do nothing, it will heal on its own in a week or two. Again, I go back to the eye is really good at healing itself. If you have fully detached cornea, then yes, surgery might be required. But if you have a partially detached cornea, the doctor will most likely recommend that you just go back and let it heal. Put a patch over your eye. Same thing with a scratched cornea. So yes, that said, it is a good idea to get somebody seeing again. So we can spend the 30, 60, 90 seconds getting their eyes flushed out. But after that 90-second mark, if we have not checked on their respiratory rate and make sure they get enough oxygen into their system, they might be suffering from respiratory failure. And we're not noticing it because we're concentrating on their eyes. So, and that is why I bring this up, and I will put this up there, and please download this and share this far and wide. People, when you go out there, please flush the eyes once and then take a look, make sure that person is breathing. They don't have any broken bones. Make sure that they don't have any other injuries from being hit by a projectile or anything other. Check on their psychological state. Make sure their mental health is as good as can be under the circumstances, knowing that we have anxiety and hyperventilation and all the other things that come along with this. But the eyes are on the road to healing already. We flushed out the eyes. It's going to take another 2 to 3 minutes for the eyes to start feeling better. The tears are producing. We supplemented the tears with liquid. The eyes are flushing already. Now we need to move on to respiratory, because I will say it again. It looks like 47% of permanent injuries from chemical irritants are respiratory in nature. Now on the left side, the same study, and the URL is down below, so feel free to go to our website and download the full study. There's some really good data there. On the left side, we have the severity of the injury from chemical irritants by percentage. So 74% of the people that got hit with chemical irritants suffered mild injuries. 17% were moderate, and severe were 9%. So almost 10% suffered severe injuries. Of those 10% of the people, out there in the world that got hit with chemical, or in the United States, that got hit with chemical irritants, of those 10%, almost 50% had respiratory failure permanently because of the chemical irritants that got deployed. And that is why I bring this up. Please share this. All right, so we understand now how chemical agents are deployed and how they work on the human body and what they're made up and how they get out there. Now we're going to start going into the treatment, and there's a lot of misconceptions. So we're going to start simple, and we're going to go into a little bit more of more techniques and more technical as time goes on. It's not going to take too long, maybe 45 minutes. So the only treatment for any chemical burn, whether it's any of the chemical irritants we just discussed, or ammonia, or bleach, or battery acid, or anything along those lines, the only treatment for an external injury is to flush. There's no two ways about it. The only exceptions for that are lye and similar chemicals. Lye is a powder form. If you get lye on your skin, you do not want to put water on it. If you put water on lye, it will cause damage to your skin. If you have lye powder on your skin and you just brush it off and it's dry, it is not going to do you much damage. But for the most part, all the chemicals that we're going to come to, and just for the record, about a week ago, there was somebody that got sprayed at a civil rights action here in the United States by a private party with an unknown substance. And I got a phone call. It's like, how do I need to test the pH level? And like, no, don't bother with the pH level. The first rule of business, if somebody gets sprayed with anything, whether it's tear gas or pepper spray, or somebody walking down the street with bleach in a spray bottle, it does not make a difference. The first thing you want to do is flush it off that person. If somebody gets contaminated with a chemical irritant, you want to flush. That is the only thing we can do. And the reason for that is, if you were in a pre-hospital setting, whether you're an EMT or a paramedic, or simply somebody who wants to practice on the Good Samaritan and provide harm reduction first aid, basic first aid services, or even if you're a physician or a trauma surgeon, does not make a difference. In a pre-hospital setting, there are very, very few injuries that you can treat outright. Meaning we always treat signs and symptoms. If somebody's having trouble breathing in a pre-hospital setting, there is not much we can do for them. If somebody has a broken bone, we splint it in place, but that is not treating the injury. If somebody has an asthma attack, they don't have an inhaler, there's not much we can do for them. Again, we don't treat the injury. If somebody has a laceration, we don't treat the injury. We stop the bleeding, but that is not treating the injury. We'd stop them from dying by stopping the bleeding, but we cannot treat that laceration in a pre-hospital setting. That said, chemical burns is probably one of the only, if not the only, injury you can treat in a pre-hospital setting, because as long as that chemical is on the human body and it is in contact with the human body, it is continuing to do damage. By removing the chemical from the skin or any other surface that you can remove it from, you are actively eliminating injury. The only way to do that is to flush it off the skin. If it's on clothing, remove the clothing. But the only way to prevent injury, to lessen the injury in the immediate aftermath of a chemical irritant being deployed on a person, is to flush it off the skin. That is the only way we can do that. So when we go to treatment, we always introduce ourselves and obtain consent. We will never treat anybody for anything without consent unless they are absolutely unconscious. If they are unconscious, you may do any life-saving measure, you will be covered under Good Samaritan law. Don't do anything that's not life-saving. That's not covered under Good Samaritan law, and we try to remain covered under Good Samaritan law here. If possible, remove that person from the area, from wherever the contamination zone is. The easiest way to get somebody from a level 1 to a level 2, or from a level 2 to a level 3, is move them to an area that has less contaminants. Because again, the more chemicals they have on them, the more it's going to cause injury and it's going to continue to burn. So if we move them away from the level 1 contaminated area, we move them to a level 2 contaminated. They might still have as many chemicals on them, but they are no longer being reapplied with more and more and more chemicals, which would happen if they were right next to wherever that nozzle is that's deploying the chemical irritants as time goes on. So remove them from the area. If you are trained on how to remove contact lenses, you may do so. If you are not trained on how to remove contact lenses, you might do harm if you try to remove contact lenses. Remember, the eyes are not very hard. They are kind of soft. We don't want to do damage. By that person tearing up, by them supplementing their tears with some liquids into their eyes, the contact lenses will start swimming and they will fall out eventually. And they will fall out within minutes. It's not going to take them hours to fall out. If you go to a hospital and you have an eye injury, if a nurse is not trained on how to remove contact lenses, she will ask somebody who is trained to remove contact lenses to come over to remove your contact lens for the same exact reason. So if in a hospital setting, they would prefer people that are trained to remove contact lenses. In a pre-hospital setting, for if you do not have training, the same thing applies. Do not stick your fingers in somebody's eyes, even with gloves on, if you do not know how to remove a contact. If you apply sideways pressure on the eyeball and you do it too much, you might break or you might scratch or detach the cornea. And that introduces a whole host of other problems that this person did not have before. With a detached cornea, they can no longer blink. So we don't want to take that chance. We always allow tear and mucus production. We want to do that. We want to promote that. In fact, when we flush the eyes, we're not trying to wash out the eyes. We are trying to supplement the tears. The tears are really good at flushing things out. If you remember, if you smoked cigarettes and you got some smoke in your eyes, or if you're outside in Southern California during fire season and you got some smoke in your eyes and your eyes start tearing up and you go indoors and 2 to 3 minutes later, your eyes feel better. Yes, they will still be red. Yes, they will still be irritated, but they start feeling better in 2 to 3 minutes because the tears are really good at flushing out the eyes. Tears come from one side and the eyelids are kind of like window wipers and they work immensely well. They move the liquids from top to bottom, side to side, and for the most part, it'll end up either in your nose or coming out the outer sides of your eyes. And if it ends up in your inner tear ducts, it'll come out your nose. If it ends up your outer side of the eyes, it'll come down to your cheeks. Remove contaminated clothing because, again, if there is chemicals on that clothing and that person is wearing it, they are continuously being burned by a chemical. So if at all possible, remove the contaminated clothing. If they are not wearing anything underneath, get them something else to wear, whether it's a towel or an extra t-shirt or a long sleeve t-shirt, whatever the case may be. But if they have a level 1 contamination on their clothing and sometimes a level 2 contamination on their clothing, that clothing must come off as soon as possible, because every second that clothing is on, they are being burned. And it's not the symptoms that we care about at this point yet. We're not up to the symptoms. We're still worrying about the actual burning that is happening, the actual damage. Pain is a symptom. The redness is a symptom. The burn is the actual injury. So we're going to treat the injury before we treat the symptoms. So by removing the contaminated clothing, we actually remove the injury from happening further, or we lessen the injury from happening further, and we stop the mechanism of injury in its tracks. Now we can start treating the signs and the symptoms. Do not let the injured party touch or rub their faces under any circumstances. Unless you can absolutely validate that they were wearing the medical exam gloves when they got hit by whatever chemical agent, and then they took them off. We do not know what's on their hands. In addition to that, if they got any chemicals on their faces and they rub their faces, they are spreading the contaminants. Contaminants are not alive. They will not move on their own. They are stuck to the skin, and that is where they will remain. They need something to move it, whether it's hands or sweat or any other liquid or a wind or a rag. Something will move it. So do not let somebody rub their face. Wherever the chemical is, it is. And we will deal with that in a moment. But if their face is 20% covered with a chemical, and that person then puts their hands on their face and starts rubbing, they are now 50% covered on their face, which makes the injury worse than it was. And the one thing we want to do here is we want to lessen the amount of chemical burns that's going on the skin. When we come upon somebody that's hit with that is contaminated with a chemical irritant, We always want to keep in the back of our heads that pre-existing conditions, in fact, I hate the word pre-existing because there's no such thing as pre-existing, but underlying conditions might exist. Whether they have been diagnosed or not, there might be an underlying condition. There's quite a few people in this world who do not know they have asthma or diabetes or emphysema or anything along those lines. So even if that person states that they do not have any underlying respiratory conditions or immunocompromising conditions, we still keep that in the back of our head. They might be undiagnosed. They still might have asthma, or in some certain circumstances, has been known to have chemical irritant induced asthma. Somebody who's never had asthma before, when they get hit with a chemical irritant, when they get contaminated, it brings on a case of asthma. That has been documented, just like there's also cold weather induced asthma. And I don't know if most of you know that, but you can look that up. It does exist. So even if that person has never had asthma in their whole life, they might be asthmatic as of today. We don't know, but we always keep that in the back of our head. If somebody does have an inhaler, or somebody pulls out an inhaler or says, I have asthma, keep in mind they might have an inhaler, and that is okay. We're going to walk into the inhaler use in a moment, but we have to, that's in the back of our head. Hypothermia, it will cause hyperventilation and profuse sweating, and the temperatures are going to start swinging to the extreme, so keep an eye on that. Respiratory distress and hyperventilation, we keep mentioning those. Decontamination procedures at home, we'll go through those, but that's one of the things that we should always keep an eye on. Is we should always keep in the back of our head that when we treat somebody and we get the chemical irritants out of their eyes, and we observe them to be breathing normally, they have a decent oxygen saturation level. Now we need to give them the lecture or the advice, or give them guidance on how, when they get home, here's how you do this. Or even when you get into your car, here's how you're going to decontaminate, because it ain't over until you are fully decontaminated, until you are fully decontaminated. And the fact of the matter is, none of us walking around on the street have enough water to do a full decontamination on the street. It does not exist. Even to do your face properly, to do your full face decontamination properly, you will need at minimum 15 gallons of water to do a proper decontamination. If you go into any industrial facility or a factory or a hospital or a fire station, most fire stations anyways, they will have an emergency eye wash station, or they will have an emergency chemical shower station, so that if there's a chemical spill or somebody gets contaminated, they hop in that shower, they pull the cord or they press the button, and there's a whole boatload of water that comes onto your face. That is how much water we actually need to do a proper decontamination. We are not going to do full decontaminations on the street. We do not have enough water. It's that simple. Don't expect to have somebody 100% better and feeling 100% the way they did before they got contaminated. No, they will have to go home and do a full decontamination procedure at home once they get home. What we do on the streets is we get them well enough where they can get to a place where they can be fully decontaminated. And I'll pause here. We have a question on the board. Is there something special about removing other people's contact lenses, like is wearing contact lens training? No, it is something that people in healthcare do go through. It is a class on how to remove somebody else's contact lenses. There's a certain amount of pressure you can apply to somebody else's eyes to remove a contact lens, and there's a certain amount of pressure that will cause the eye damage. So yes, there is training that you can take that will help you figure out how to remove somebody else's contact. It's not like wearing your own contacts and removing it. We are much more comfortable sticking our fingers in our own eyes because we can feel the feedback pressure on the eye. We know how much pressure to apply when putting on or removing contact lenses. When we stick our fingers in a stranger's eyes, we don't get that same feedback. So we don't know how much pressure to apply, and there's methods to removing somebody else's contact lenses which require less pressure than when we remove our own contact lenses. So yes, there are classes. I do not know if there's YouTube, and honest to God, everything exists on YouTube, so chances are there's a YouTube video on how to remove somebody else's contact lens. I don't know. I've never done that through YouTube. But yes, there are classes out there that you can take. If you're in healthcare, that is. I do not know if that class is available for the general public. All right, so chemical treatments overview, again, we're going to go from a high level, is absolutely you should evacuate somebody from the affected area. You should always treat the burn, remove the affected clothing, because if not, they're going to keep being burned. Use water or saline to flush, and only water or saline. Treat the burn first, then the symptoms. And this is something that we have to keep in mind, that the burn is going to continue to do damage. The symptoms will not. The symptoms hurt, but the symptoms itself externally on the skin will not cause damage in most circumstances. There are some rare circumstances, such as swelling that hasn't, because you haven't, if you have swelling on your skin because of pepper spray, you have an underlying condition most likely, and now we have a medical emergency. Don't know the severity, but that would be an acute medical issue. So, and I'll use the dry clean cloth to dab chemicals off the skin, and we'll get into that in a moment. Maybe, sometimes, not all the time. The column on the left is something you should always do for everybody that gets contaminated. The one on the right, depending on the scenario. And we have two questions about liquid and acid. We'll get into that in a moment. The column on the right is something we should do depending on the scenario, but sometimes we can flush specifically affected area. Specifically meaning the face. If somebody gets pepper spray in their mouth and you have a water bottle, give them some water, let them get a sip of water, swish it around in their mouth and spit it out. That is going to remove a certain percentage of the chemicals from their mouth. It's not going to remove all of it, but any chemicals that we can get rid of that are in contact with the human body will start lessening the damage that it's causing. Once we are done treating the burn, we can start treating the symptoms, which is the redness and the itching and all of that good stuff. Asthmatic may use inhalers, prolong if possible. The reason for that is if somebody's asthmatic or if somebody's not asthmatic, it doesn't make a difference. If somebody inhaled a chemical irritant, a chemical agent into their lungs, for the most part, we don't breathe extremely deeply all the way into deep to the depths of our lungs. That's not the way the average person breathes. We average about 65, 70% of our lung capacity on any given time. When somebody is asthmatic and they use an inhaler goes all the way down into the depths of their lungs. And when they do that, they need to breathe in deeper than they always do, and they need to get that chemical all the way down. And when they use that inhaler, it's going to be whether it's a steroidal or non-steroidal inhaler. They're going to spray that into their mouth, and then they're going to take the deepest breath that they can. So if they inhaled the chemical irritant 30 seconds ago at 60% lung capacity, but now they put some inhaler in their mouth and the steroidal or non-steroidal medication in their mouth, and then they did a 100% lung capacity inhalation, they also moved the chemical irritant deeper into their lungs. So if somebody's asthmatic and they have an inhaler and they need to use an inhaler, they should use it. However, I always ask them, if you can, please exhale a couple of times. And one of the sad things is asthmatics have trouble exhaling. It's just, that's the way it works. So if possible, get somebody that's asthmatic to cough or exhale forcibly once or twice to get as much of that chemical out of their lungs as possible, and then use an inhaler, which is why it states asthmatic may use an inhaler, but prolong it if possible. Let them get as much of that chemical out of their lungs as possible, but absolutely, if they have been medically prescribed with an inhaler, they need to use it. Any symptoms lasting for more than 45 minutes, with the exception of mild skin irritation, that's going to last probably a full day or so, but any other symptoms, any respiratory symptoms that last for more than 45 minutes required elevated care, meaning somebody has to take care of it. If you are trained, I'll say it again, if you are trained, you can remove contact lenses. If you are not trained, I would think, I'm not going to say no, I am not your medical director. I'm not here to tell you what to do. But if you are not trained, have a conversation with, if you're in an organization, you have somebody that fulfills the role of the medical director. If you're practicing solo, take a step back, sit down and think about it. Am I comfortable enough removing somebody else's contact lenses, knowing that there's so much going on, that person is panicking and they're they have anxiety and they're worried and they're hyperventilating and they're hurting. Do I really want to stick my fingers in their eyes? Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit more details, and we'll get to the whole antacid thing in a minute. Okay, and this is where we start getting into the more, I guess, technical and scientific details. So the couple of things we should never do is we should never really pour water on the head to flush the face. The reason for that is we do not have water to do a full decontamination in the street. What we can, at the last slide, we said sometimes you can do it in specific areas you can flush with water. And that is if somebody has, if their hand, if they have one or two of their fingers or their nose is contaminated, you'll have enough water to decontaminate their nose. But you do not have the at the minimum, 5 to 7 gallons of water it will take to do a proper decontamination of somebody's full face. So we're going to treat the eyes so they can see, and then we're going to treat their respiratory, make sure they can breathe properly. And if they can, we are going to get them to a place that they can do a full decontamination. If not, there are other methods we can treat. We can eliminate the injuries with, we can eliminate the chemicals with, but we do not have enough water to do a full flush. If we don't have enough water to do a full flush and we pour water or any liquid on somebody that has chemicals, all we're going to do is spread it around. Because so we don't want to start decontaminating if we cannot do a full decontamination. A partial decontamination means the only thing we accomplished was we put the chemicals from where it was to a lot more places than where it was. That is the only thing we're going to accomplish. So on the streets, do not pour water on somebody's house, on somebody's head to flush the face. There are better and easier and more appropriate methods to decontaminate the face than simply pouring water on the face. Do not use an oil-based product to treat or flush. A couple of reasons for that. We discussed it earlier, and again, if you download the pages that we put up at that link, you'll see that all of these 3 chemicals are oil-based in nature, with the exception of the pepper spray, the OC balls, the projectile balls, the paintball types. In the paintball type pepper is going to be a powder form. So don't put any liquids on it. There's no reason to. That is a dry powder. The only thing you need to do is get a dry rag and brush it off, and it'll come off great because it's dry. If that person is sweating, we have a dry rag and we dab it off. The dry rag will absorb the water, and now the pepper comes off along with the water that came off. Or in worst case scenario, we got half of the pepper off along with the sweat. The other half will come off the next round because the skin is now dry and the pepper powder is dry as well. It'll come right off, but don't dab it. But the reason we say don't use an oil-based product is because never in history of mankind has anybody used an oil-based product to wash something off themselves. We use an oil-based product to cover a wound and to seal it. If we have say the Neosporin that we buy at the pharmacy, at over-the-counter Neosporin or whatever the antibiotic medication, most of those things are going to be oil-based because we want to seal the wound that we got with an oil, because the oil is going to stay there. It's going to stay there a lot longer than the water. So what we just did, if we put on an oil-based product to decontaminate somebody, we got some oil that has a chemical irritant in it on our skin, and we put oil on top of it. The only thing we accomplished was we sealed the chemical against our skin. Okay, that is the only thing we accomplish if we use an oil-based product. And by oil-based product, I specifically mean milk, whether it's cow's milk or goat milk or anything along those lines. Don't use it. If there's oils in it, it will not flush. It will not get rid of if you're trying to flush oil off your skin, you're going to need a degreasing agent. Oil is not going to flush oil off the skin. Never induce vomiting, no matter how much if that person is vomiting, that's fine. That's the human body doing what it needs to get rid of whatever's in its stomach. It might not be induced by the chemical irritant, it might be induced by anxiety or various other things, but we do not induce vomiting. Never pour chemicals in somebody's eyes, and chemicals is anything other than water or saline. Saline matches, for the most part, tears, so it's okay to put into somebody's eyes. And water, we all take a shower every morning, or every other morning or at night or whatever the case may be, and we get water in our eyes and it doesn't hurt us. So water and saline are okay to put into your eyes. Do not force the eyes open. The eyes are fairly smart at what they do. They, even if the eyes are closed, it's a fight or flight mechanism, and the eyes will shut, and they will shut drastically. And underneath that, the tears are forming, and they are starting to flush. The eyes will know when it needs to protect itself. And I guarantee you that if you put 1 or 2 drops of saline on the inside of the eye, but at the bridge of the nose, and you have that person try to blink, they will be able to blink by about 1/4 of an inch, and give it 10 seconds, they'll be able to blink twice as much. And within 90 seconds, that person will be able to open their eyes. There is absolutely no reason for you to force open somebody's eyes unless they have something poured into their eyes and you have enough water to flush it out there and they are laying prone on the ground. Do not treat the pH level, and we'll get into that in a second. Do not use a spray to decontaminate. And the reason why we say do not use a spray to decontaminate, because the spray will cover a much wider area than where the chemical is currently. We cannot see really where the chemical is, right? Sometimes we can. Most of the times you won't be able to, because it's not going to be applied in a thick enough layer where the color of the chemical will show up against the skin. So if we use a spray, remember, this is an oil-based product. If we use a spray that comes out of a bottle under pressure, we're going to move that chemical around on the skin. We're not flushing, we're not decontaminating. A spray from a spray bottle is not how we do it. A spray from a garden hose is how you would decontaminate, but we don't walk around with garden hoses. Most of us do not drive around with fire trucks and 3-inch nozzles on the end to decontaminate. So we walk around with the little water spray bottles. That will not do a damn thing to decontaminate somebody's face. It's that simple. It might help them a little bit, but in all honesty, what we're going to do by spraying somebody's face is we're going to get the chemicals from where they are, and we are going to end up spreading it to where they did not get hit. The reason I have on the bottom, there's lemon juice and battery acid. Both have very low pH level, less than 2, in fact. However, both get treated differently. The reason I put that up there is just to prove a point. We don't treat pH levels. We don't know what the pH level of anything is because there's multiple companies making these things. They come in various different pH levels. We don't care what the pH level is. It's not the pH of the chemical irritant that's going to hurt you. And in fact, there's only two chemicals out there that absolutely mandate you being admitted into the hospital, and they are drain cleaner and battery acid. If you drink bleach, the hospital will not necessarily admit you. They will ask you to come in and they will observe you for a few hours, but it's not an automatic admittal. The same thing if you drink ammonia. It is not an automatic admittal. However, if you drink drain cleaner or battery acid, that is an automatic admittal. They would admit you, get you a bed, hook you up to all kinds of machines, and you're staying overnight. But if you drink bleach, you can go to the hospital and they will say, all right, sit right there in the corner for the next 2 hours and we'll keep an eye on you. And they'll get you probably something to drink. But beyond that, there's not much they're going to do for you. We'll pause here before we go into the whole antacid thing, and then we'll answer some questions. So we have an anonymous question. We had a homeless woman get sprayed with pepper spray. Would you still not rinse the face considering she didn't have access to a shower or the like? How would you suggest treating? We will get into that treatment in a moment. So give me a moment and we'll answer that question. Next question, as far as flushing someone's eyes, which is better, water or saline? They both work equally as good. If you buy the little saline containers, the 5 milliliter saline containers, it is much easier to pass it on to that person and have them put 1 drop into each eye every 20, 30 seconds. One of the things we try to do is we try to empower the self. If we hand out those little 5 milliliter saline containers, and I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about, if we hand it out to the injured party, we give them a task, we give them a responsibility, and we also make them part of the healing process. So I am very much a big fan in that case, once we do the initial flush and get the majority of the chemicals out of the eyes, enough where that person feels relief, it still hurts and it burns like hell, and their vision is probably still blurred and they cannot open their eyes for more than a split second and they're still blinking like a mad dog, that is perfectly acceptable. But we know they're on the road to recovery. At this point, I will give that person two of the the saline little 5 milliliter containers, the ampules, the plastic ones, and I will twist off the top off one and I will say, here, one drop in each eye every 15 seconds, and just keep blinking. And I will guarantee every single one of you that regardless of the chemical, in 90 seconds, that person will be remarkably improved in their eyes. It's that simple. It will not take long to get better, to get their eyes feeling better. The symptoms are going to last for much longer. They're going to last for hours. Their eyes are going to be red, they're going to be teary, and they're going to be swollen and irritated and whatnot. But the damage is no longer occurring. At this point, we're treating symptoms. We got the actual chemicals out of their eyes, and now we're just treating symptoms. And that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the chemicals out of the eyes. We're not trying to treat the symptoms in the eyes. That takes time. There's nothing we can do for that. The redness in the eye, that's going to take time. So initially, I would give that person saline. If you give somebody a bottle of water, they'll put way too much water in their eyes, and that's not needed. It's not going to do any much better than literally one drop of saline, because you don't need a lot of tears to flush out the eyes, and the tears are going to be reproducing constantly. We're not trying to wash out the tears. We're trying to supplement the tears a little bit. That is all we're trying to accomplish. Next question we have is, how much water is needed to flush a very specific area? More than one. The eyes, you do not need more than one water bottle. In fact, we had an in-person class here in Southern California yesterday. I think there were 10 or 12 people there, and we practiced, and it took us less than a half an ounce of water to flush somebody's eyes. And we had people who've never done this. They practiced on each other. We didn't spray anybody's eyes with chemicals and stuff, but we just had them practice flushing their eyes so they know what it feels like. And it did not take more than a total of not even a half an ounce of water to flush somebody's eyes. It does not take a lot of water to flush somebody's eyes. And I'll show you some tools that will help in a few minutes. Let's get there, but I just want to answer the basic questions on the treatments here. Define flush, please, the no spray. So yeah, so we'll define the flush as opposed to the spray here in a moment. Give us a moment. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, for lack of a better one, milk of magnesia. So milk of magnesia is something that a lot of people are talking about, and they're for interesting reasons. And I've personally tested it. There's been quite a few other people that have tested it, and nobody has yet found scientific data to prove that it works. However, the reasons people are using it, the reasons initially people started using it is, and we'll go through the list. On the left side, we'll start off with the left side. So milk of magnesia, the chemical compound, the chemical in milk of magnesia that actually works to get your bowels moving and whatnot is actually magnesium hydroxide. But it's the primary ingredient in milk of magnesia. It's the active ingredient. Milk of magnesia contains a lot of other ingredients as well as other metals, because the point of milk of magnesium hydroxide and the other supplemental metals is what they do is they bind to water in your stomach, and therefore they introduce a regular bowel movement. That's what they do. So milk of magnesia in of itself, I'm going to kind of skip up and down here. I'm not going to go in order. Magnesium hydroxide is not water soluble. It does not dilute in water. So if it's a particle, kind of like a powder, very fine powder, but it's still a particle, it does not dilute in water. It attaches itself to water. It absorbs water. It does not dilute in water. It will remain its solid form. That's how it works. That's how it gives us bowel movements, because it will attract water to itself and it will start growing bigger and bigger. And now we have a regular bowel movements, which is exactly what we wanted. So That said, if milk of magnesia has all of these things that are not water soluble, if we pour it into somebody's eyes, worst case scenario, we can cause corneal abrasions. It is not that uncommon. Corneal abrasion is not something you want, but it's also not something that in of itself is going to be a life-altering injury. It'll probably, if it's bad enough, it'll probably hurt you for a week and then it'll heal on its own. If it's really, really bad, if you go to the doctor, they might give you some optical steroids and whatnot, some eye drops that contain steroids to promote the healing and lessen the irritation. But in all honesty, there's not much, no real medication that will heal a corneal abrasion. It just takes time. But worst case scenario, milk of magnesia can cause corneal abrasions if we don't flush it out of the eyes because it has particles. It works by binding on, I kind of went over that, it works by binding to water in the stomach and guts and therefore thereby promoting proper bowel movement. Now, the biggest reason that I can come up with, and a couple of other folks that work more in the chemical industry, I'm not a chemist, I work in healthcare, but a couple of chemists I spoke to who helped write up that document that you can download on the website, is the best thing they can come up with is because magnesium hydroxide is used to stabilize acids. And initially, years ago, when law enforcement started using riot control agents, it was acid attack, and it was known as an acid. And if you all remember, years ago, I've been doing this for 20 years, but years ago, folks used to put just a rag with citric acid because that acid will block other acids from being inhaled, and that was supposed to have said work. But again, we don't care, or we don't know, because we don't know which of these chemical agents are acid and which ones are not. They're all made in different pH levels at this point. That's because it's not the acidity that's hurting us, it's the irritation and the burning. It's not, it's kind of weird, but on bleach, not necessarily on bleach, but on battery acid, it's the acid that's going to hurt you. On Drano, drain cleaner, it's the acid, the opposite of the acid, it's the base side that's going to hurt you. So, but on these chemical irritants, it's not the acidity that's going to hurt you, it's the irritation that's going to keep burning into your skin. So the best thing that the chemists I spoke to can come up with is, because magnesium hydroxide is used in the chemical industry to stabilize acids, somebody years ago figured or came up with the idea that, hey, if it stabilizes acids in a chemical industry, let's neutralize and stabilize acids that get sprayed onto human beings. And so we started. That I don't know. That's a hypothesis, the best I can come up with. But the one thing that I know for a fact is milk of magnesia, for the most part, will have some sort of a minty type flavor to it. And if you put that on your skin after you got irritated with a chemical irritant, that mint is going to feel righteous on your skin. It's just like you put the whatever that in the Vicks Vapor Rub. So similar to, if you put Vicks Vapor Rub over pepper spray, it'll feel really good. The problem with that is that by putting Vicks Vapor Rub or milk of magnesia on top of pepper spray or tear gas that's on your skin, you are not removing the chemical. All you're doing is treating the symptom and not the actual burning that's going on underneath. So milk of magnesia, yep, it'll feel good on your skin, but it is not a very good flushing agent. Water is still the best flushing agent. Water is what every emergency EMS system in the world uses to flush any chemicals, with few exceptions, lye and whatnot. But water is what we want to use to flush. It is the best flushing we can do. On the right is some of the validation for what we said it on the left. So again, milk of magnesia does not treat the burn at all. It treats a symptom. And for the most part, what it'll do is it'll treat the irritation that we have on the skin, because it's minty in flavor and that'll feel downright righteous. It does not do a damn good thing for the actual burning. And the same thing applies to peppermint oil. The question keeps coming up every time I do this class, and we've done this class, I think 6-7 times now. Somebody will inevitably ask, can I put peppermint oil on your skin? And the answer is yep. Once you're fully decontaminated, you can put peppermint oil on your skin, and it will treat your symptoms, the symptom being irritation. You have a skin irritation. Once you do not have the chemical on your skin, you can treat that irritation. But as long as this chemical is on your skin, do not treat the irritation, because the irritation is not what's going to cause you damage. It'll cause you discomfort. The chemical on your skin will cause you damage. So does that answer any everybody's questions about milk of magnesia? I hope so. And if you have any further questions, feel free. I'm here, and we'll keep going at this. Okay. So the best method is when it comes to, because we've already established the best way to decontaminate somebody is to flush, or actually it's the only way to decontaminate somebody properly is to flush. We do not carry enough water to flush. That said, there are some tricks that we can use, because all of these chemicals, with the exception of the pepper pellets, all the other chemical agents that come out in a spray form or a fog type form, they're all going to be oil-based. The best method to getting them off your skin is by using a degreasing agent. What a degreasing agent does, and this can be, think about dish soap, or if you have oily, or even if you don't have oily skin, shampoo is a degreasing agent, right? Soaps are not degreasing agent. Soap is lye-based. Soap is a cleanser. It does not remove oils. Shampoo and dish detergent do very good. If you ever had pasta, or whether it's gluten or non-gluten, and you put pasta sauce in a Tupperware container, that yellow stuff, you can spend an hour washing it out with plain water. The instant you put a little bit of dish detergent in there, because that is a degreasing agent, it will bind to the oils. It will lift the oils off the surface, the plastic surface, and they will start floating in the water. And now you can flush out, you can rinse out all the oils. And by using a little bit of dish detergent on your Tupperware container, you get rid of that oily pasta sauce color that we have in the Tupperware. That's how dishwasher soap works. That is what all your dish soap does. It's simply a degreasing agent. The best human safe degreasing agent known to man is Johnson's & Johnson's baby shampoo, and not necessarily Johnson's & Johnson's, but we all know Johnson's & Johnson's tear-free baby shampoo. It is the best degreasing agent we have on the market today. I don't know if the non-brand names, and I'm sure CVS and Walmart and all the other companies in the world, I'm sure they make their versions of baby shampoo. I am positive they work just as well as degreasing agents. The only reason I'm mentioning Johnson & Johnson is because everybody knows that. So Johnson's & Johnson's baby shampoo, they make it very, very specifically to be tear-free, meaning it's not going to hurt your eyes. That said, do not put Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo in somebody's eyes, because the eyes have the tears, and the tears are going to get rid of the oils in the eyes really quickly. Literally if you supplement the tears in somebody's eyes, I will guarantee you that in 90 seconds, thereabouts, they will be chemical free in the eyes. Again, the symptoms are going to last for a much longer time, but the chemicals are going to be gone from the eyes, and we're treating the burn primarily. So now, that said, if we take some Johnson & Johnson and we dilute it in the water, because we don't need pure shampoo, we want a little bit of shampoo with a little bit more water, and we wipe the skin wherever the oil is, and remember the chemical is suspended in some oil base. What that Johnson & Johnson water mix will do is it will lift the oil off the skin. And we can accomplish this without wiping. And this is exactly how the Sudicon wipes work. And if you've ever been affected by, there's a poison ivy, poison oak, there's a very specific chemical wipe that they make for poison ivy and poison oak that it starts with a T, tuna care or something like that. I forgot the name. Also prohibitively expensive. But both the Sudicon wipes and the wipes for the poison ivy and poison oak work the same exact method. They have a degreasing agent that is infused into the wipe, and when you dab on the skin, when you don't wipe, because when we wipe anything, we're going to smear it, we're going to spread it. So when we dab at the skin, that degreasing agent is going to lift the oil, whether it's a chemical irritant or whether it's a poison ivy or poison oak, as those are oil-based as well. But that's how they work. They lift the oil off the skin and it gets absorbed into the wipe. So that said, we don't want to dilute baby shampoo in water and pour it over the skin, because that's not going to do much. It's going to help, it's going to degrease and it's going to lift the oils off the skin, but we're also going to further the contamination, because chances are we do not have enough water to do a full flush. So what I would do, and this is what we use here locally now in Southern California with, say, at least half the medics that I roll out with on the street on a regular basis, is we get baby wipes in one of those resealable containers. We fill it up about halfway with water, and then we pour in about 3 to 4 ounces of baby shampoo, and we shake it around a bit, and we let it sit overnight. And then we open it up, and we pour the rest of the water, whatever extra water it is, we pour that out. And now we seal it back up, and it's again, this is a resealable baby shampoo contraption thingy, whatever they call them, container, but it's not necessarily a hard container. It's soft plastic containers, and we walk around with those. Those can be kept for months, and we make tens of these packs, and that's what we walk around with. And now, time and time again, over the past few weeks, we've tried this, and when somebody's gotten affected, and this works on the pepper balls, which is not oil-based, and it works as well on the tear gas and the pepper spray, which is oil-based. We take one of these baby wipes, and because they are not 100% wet, they will absorb liquid, but they are, I'd say, 25 to 50% moisture that is infused with Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo. So when we dab the skin, it will lift off the oils and it'll absorb into the baby wipes, and we just keep dabbing. And it works really well for pepper spray, and it works amazingly well for any oil-based chemical irritants. Once we're done with that, we do one round of dabbing on the face all over, then we get a clean rag and we dab as a follow-up, and that will pick up anything else that is left on the skin. And we will do this process 2 or 3 times. And that is how we decontaminate without spreading the chemicals from where they are to where they are not. That is the best method we have found. Now, you can go out and get Sudocon wipes. However, Sudocon wipes have an expiration date. They are prohibitively expensive. I mean, like prohibitively expensive. I bought some. I can afford it. Most people cannot. I bought them just to test them out. The Sudocon wipes, there's a patent to them, and you can download the ingredient list from the U.S. Patent Office, and you can make it in your house. You can do it, and you can. There is no reason for all of that. If you do Johnson & Johnson, or honestly any degreasing shampoo, it's just that baby shampoo is a really good degreasing agent. And if you promise yourself never to use it on somebody's eyes, you can use the Dial dish soap because it's hand friendly. It is skin friendly. It's not going to irritate the skin. So you can use decent, Dial or whatever the other companies are that make the hand safe dishwashing soap. That is the absolute best degreasing agent you can buy under the sun. But do not get a degreasing agent that you use to degrease the engine in your car. Don't use that on the human skin. That's not, absolutely no. But degreasing agent that is skin friendly, again, baby shampoo is really good. If you don't have baby shampoo, honestly, any decent shampoo will work. Conditioners and soaps do not. They are not degreasing agents. Any dishwashing agent, any dishwashing soap is a 100% degreasing agent, but the problem with dishwashing soap is not all of them are skin friendly. All right, let me read the Q&A session we have here. Okay, so when I say we have a question, when a clean rag to dab after dabbing with Johnson & Johnson wipes, is that just water on a cloth? No, that is a dry cloth, because what we want that cloth to do, we want that cloth to absorb everything that the baby wipe did not absorb. Because at this point, what we did was we put a degreasing agent on the person's skin, and the baby wipes absorbed quite a bit of the liquids back, or the oils back into it. We're going to follow that up with a dry, personally, I use the microbial wipes that they have for cars. I find those work really well as opposed to standard rags. But what that'll do is the baby wipe made the skin wet. It also dropped a little bit of the degreasing agent on it, and it absorbed some of the oils. Now I will follow that up with a very clean, dry rag to absorb everything that the baby wipe just dropped on the skin, which will include the oils, because the degreasing agent lifted the oils, and the chemical oils are now floating in the water that I put on that person's skin. And I do this without spreading it. So which is why we say dab, do not wipe. Dab, do not wipe, so we don't spread the chemicals from where they are to where they are not. Can we do paper towels? Yes, a paper towel works great. A paper towel absolutely works great. I just personally found that rags I can bunch up, and I can carry more rags and paper towels. A roll of paper towels will get squished and they get dirty, whereas a rag I can keep in a Ziploc bag or something along those lines. But yes, anything that's clean, that is super absorbent, will work. But remember, dab, not wipe, because we do not want to spread. At this point in time, what we are treating a chemical burn. We are not treating the symptoms yet. Until that person is decontaminated, the skin irritation is secondary concern for us. Because, well, I'll go back to it, almost 50% of permanent injuries are respiratory. The other 50%, almost all of them, is going to be psychological or muscular. So we have to get that chemical off as fast as possible, or as much as possible, and get that person who was contaminated to go someplace where they can be fully decontaminated as quickly as possible. We have a question. Thoughts on using something along the lines of Equate beauty oil absorbing sheets? As long as it's not, I have an honest case. So honestly, I'll say I have no idea what Equate beauty oil absorbing sheets are, but they sound similar to a paper towel. Just it's a cooler name. I would try to use something that does not have chemicals in it, because we do not know. As much as we can say that person was sprayed with pepper spray or CS gas or tear gas or mace or whatever the case may be, the tear gas and the mace and or the pepper spray, they are infused with so many different chemicals that do not belong on the human skin. And we have no idea what they're made out of, honestly. We know what the irritants are, but the irritant comes along with a whole host of other chemicals that gets done with the manufacturing process. And the chemicals that were deployed and are now on my skin do not belong on my skin. So I do not know if Equate beauty oil absorbing sheets have chemicals in them that might react with the chemicals that are now on my skin, which is why I prefer to use a clean rag that I know was never used, does not have anything on it, or paper towels do not have any chemicals. I would try to stay away from fancy stuff because we do not know if it's infused. I know Puff's tissue paper is infused with some weird stuff that makes it smoother on your nose. I wouldn't use that because I don't know how that's going to interact with the chemicals I currently have on my skin. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I can't. The only way you guys can communicate with me, the only way you folks can communicate with me through the QA session, but I hope that makes sense. And the point we're trying to accomplish here is harm reduction. We're not trying to heal them. That person is going to be irritated and their skin is going to be irritated and they're going to be hurting for a very long time. And there's not much we can do for that. But what we can do and what we should do, and our number one priority, is to stop the chemical burning. So now I'll go back to, we had a question earlier from Anonymous. We had a homeless person get sprayed with pepper spray. Would you still not rinse the face considering she did not have access to a shower or the like? So yes, so this is how I would treat this. And the answer for that is, if we do not have enough water to do a full decontamination, then by not doing a full decontamination, all we're going to do is spread the contamination. And the only way we can eliminate or eliminate some of the chemicals that are actively burning against the skin is by lifting them off the skin. The easiest way to do that, because the majority of them are going to be oil-based, the easiest way to do them in the most scientifically efficient manner to do that is by using some sort of a degreasing agent, whether it's Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo or dishwashing soap that's, again, skin friendly. And no matter what you use, you really do not have to put any of that into anybody's eyes, because the eyes will be flushed out faster than you think they will be. All right, move on. Things to keep in mind. Do not put anything that is not sterile do not put anything that is not sterile into or on an open wound. It's that simple. Just don't do it. If somebody has a laceration from the canister that got deployed, just bandage it, stop the bleed. And if it's big enough, they need stitches, have them check it out at a healthcare facility. But don't pour stuff in there if you don't know how to pour stuff in there. Milk of magnesia in the eyes can cause harm. Nobody says it will cause harm. Nobody's saying that it's not lessening the injury, but milk of magnesia in the eyes have a greater chance of causing harm than water in the eyes. Hence, for that one scientific reason alone, you should not use milk of magnesia. And feel free to have that conversation and use that argument against anybody that says milk of magnesia in the eyes works. Milk of magnesia will not work any better in the eyes than plain water or saline. There's no, that you cannot argue. On the skin, it feels better. On the eyes, the mint tea will make your eyes feel really weird. If you ever got mint spray in your eyes, it feels really weird. We never treat without consent, and that person might be hyperventilating, they might be anxious, they might be panicking. Just walk over to them. Hi, my name is XYZ, and I know how to do first aid, and I'm going to help you flush your eyes, and it's going to take a few minutes, but I promise you, you'll start feeling better. Get consent. Have them tell you, yes, please do this. At every step of the way, can you open your eyes? Can you lean back? Can you sit on your hands? And as soon as we start seeing a healing process, try to empower that person. Try to get them to be part of the healing process. Give them the water bottle to swish out their mouth. Give them the little saline packets or the water bottle to put a couple of drops in their eyes. If we make them part of the healing process, we empower them. And psychologically, it starts the healing process as well. Because we have to keep in mind that this person was just hit with a chemical that is no human under the sun should be hit with. So because of that, there's going to be psychological injuries as well. No matter how stubborn we are, there's going to be psychological damage. And in the moment, it might not last very long, but there's going to be psychological injuries. And we're going to be hurting mentally because we got hit with some chemical agents that, good God, I didn't need it. Treat the burn before you treat the symptoms. Again, the itching of the skin is not my greatest concern. The respiratory issues, the burning of the skin, the actual chemical on the skin, those are going to be life-altering injuries. Those are what we concentrate on first. The canisters are hot, very hot. Wearing leather gloves to remove them. We're not necessarily leather, but wear thick gloves because they're going to be 300-400 degrees. Always keep in mind underlying conditions, respiratory distress. So decontamination procedures at home. Before we go home, you have to remember that this person has chemical agents on their skin and clothing and backpack and shoes and whatnot. And when they get into their car, that person is now contaminating their vehicle. If that person has a car seat in their vehicle, please ask them when they ask. Hopefully that person is not going to walk by themselves to their vehicle. They're going to go with a friend. Tell the friend who is not contaminated. If the person that was contaminated has a car seat in their vehicle, take the car seat out of the vehicle before they get in. Because I will guarantee you they will forget to decontaminate their car seat. And the next time in a week from now, their little kid gets into that car seat, if there's any of that chemical on that car seat, it is not going to be a pretty sight. And no parent wants their child to be hit with secondhand contamination because we forgot to decontaminate the car seat. So take the car seat out. If you can't put it in the trunk, or have a friend put it in their car and give it to the original owner at a later date. But if You cannot do that. That person, whoever was contaminated, once they are fully decontaminated, they have to fully decontaminate the car seat at the minimum. They're wherever they sat would be nice, but the car seat at the minimum. You do not want to take chances with kids touching pepper spray that or any of those gases or whatever it is that's been sitting on that car seat for a couple of days, and then they get in the car seat and they put their hands down and oops, it's going to hurt. It might not hurt a lot for an adult. It might not hurt us because we went through a lot more. But for a child that's never experienced this and a child that should never experience this, if they touch pepper spray, it is not going to be a pretty sight. When that person is on their way home, whoever's contaminated, they're on their way home, um, make a phone call to their house, and if somebody is home, have them open every door between the front door and the bathroom and hide all the pets, and all the kids and all the adults should be out of the way, and the pets should be restrained because we do not want a very excited dog or cat to come and hop on whoever it is that's walking into the house that's full of tear gas or mace or pepper spray. We don't want the dog to jump on them because now we have a problem because that dog is not going to be contained and that dog is going to run around the house and contaminate the whole house. So hide the pets. We have a clear path from the front door to the bathroom, to the shower. The person that's contaminated will walk directly from the front door into the shower. They will get in the shower and they will strip naked, absolutely naked. Everything comes off, stays in the shower. Put the clothing at the back of the shower, and you stand about, the person that's contaminated stands about halfway between the front and the back of the shower, bends forward at a 90-degree angle, turns on the overhead shower, and now they can start decontaminating their head. By bending forward at a 90-degree angle, any chemicals that the water is getting rid of is not flowing down to their chest and their torso and their legs. It's going directly off their face into the drain. And initially, it will hurt more because we're spreading the chemicals, but this is part of the decontamination process. We have enough water now where even if we're spreading the chemicals, it's going to come off in seconds and it's not going to do lasting damage. We have enough water now. We have a full-on shower running on us. What we're doing is we're following the same decontamination procedures that every firefighter in the United States is trained in, every hospital is trained in. This is how they decontaminate. Turn on the shower, head top to bottom. Keep yourself bent forward at a 90-degree angle for as long as you can, moving from your head down. At some point, it's going to be uncomfortable and you have to stand up. That's fine. Just keep decontaminating down. You can do it once or twice with plain water and then do it with shampoo. Again, because shampoo is a degreasing agent, it will lift the oils off. And yes, to the person that's posed the question, yes, a cold shower is a lot better than a hot shower, so you don't open the pores. Our goal is not to be clean. Our goal here is to decontaminate. We're going to clean ourselves. Once we are fully decontaminated, we can clean ourselves as much as we want with soap. But for the initial shower, 1 or 2 cycles, we want to use shampoo head to toe because that will lift the oils off the skin and the water will flush it away. And that is how we do a proper decontamination. Once we are fully decontaminated in the shower, we're going to get a bag and put our now wet clothing. And it's good to have the clothing wet. The contaminated clothing is wet. Now it's not going to produce a cloud of chemicals when we move it. We're going to put those directly into a bag. And whether you want to wash them or not is a personal choice. If you want to wash them, do not wash them with anything else. Wash them in at least 2 cycles. See if you can buy some decontamination, some oil-based soap, but don't use dishwasher soap in the shampoo. Trust me, I've seen people do it. It makes a lot of bubbles, and you're going to have like a bubble bath in your washroom or wherever the laundry room is. You're going to have a bubble bath. So don't use dishwashing soap in the washing machine. Not a good idea. Any soap, any soap will do. There's some soaps that are better at lifting oils in the laundry. Some soaps are a lot, but any soap is better than nothing, and just run it 1 or 2 cycles, you'll be fine. Now you can treat your skin irritation. Up until now, we were not treating our skin irritation because we still had chemicals, and any skin irritation treatment is, I'm not going to say any, but the vast majority of them are going to be oil-based. The ones that are not oil-based are going to be steroid-based. Either way, whether it's steroids or oil-based, it's going to cause the chemicals to do more harm. So up until now, we could not treat the skin irritation, but now we can. Now you can put peppermint oil or any other natural or product you want, or the whatever soothing creams you have. Now that you're decontaminated, you can put that on your skin, and that'll help the irritation go away. Keeping in mind that the skin irritation might last for a full 24 hours. The redness might last for a full 24 hours. If your skin is swollen, if your hands are swollen, that should not last for 24 hours. If it lasts for more than 4 hours, you should go see a healthcare professional. If you have trouble breathing for more than 45 minutes, if you're in respiratory distress for more than 45 minutes post-contamination, you should go see a doctor. One of the questions a lot of people ask is define respiratory distress. So over the years of teaching EMT and paramedic classes, this is what I've come up with, is most of us do not know when we breathe. We just do it. It's automatic. It's normal. We don't think about it. When we have to think, or when we notice that we're breathing, that is the beginning stage of respiratory distress, and it just goes up from there. So if the person you're talking to is thinking about breathing, meaning they have to pause to talk to you to breathe, they are in respiratory distress. It can be a very minor respiratory distress, but 10 minutes ago, before they got contaminated by any of these chemicals, they were not in respiratory distress. So that in itself needs to be noted. It should be written down. And I hope, personally, I keep notes of everybody I come in contact with, and I'll cover that in a second, but I give them the notes, but I write it down. Their respiratory distress was noticed at X time. And again, the reason for that is if they are in respiratory distress for an extended period of time, that is abnormal. At this point, they are not getting enough oxygen in their system. Well, we can check that with a pulse ox. You can check their SATs with a pulse ox. It's fairly easy. Pop a pulse ox on somebody's finger as you're flushing their eyes. So now you have a baseline of where they were, because initially, if they're in respiratory distress, their pulse ox is going to say they're a 96. After you spent 5 minutes with them, you're flushing out their eyes. They coughed a couple of times, blew their nose 17 times. Now their SATs are saying 98%. Yes, that is a lot better than what it was. But if we just put the pulse ox on after 5 minutes of treating them and we see their SATs are 98, we have no idea if it was 100 earlier or if it was 96 earlier. So they go hand in hand. Remember, respiratory distress, permanent respiratory distress, is almost 50% of the injuries. That should be treated just as quickly or monitored, because we really can't treat respiratory distress, but that should be monitored just as quickly as we monitor any eye injuries. Now we have a question on the board. What would make you concerned about long-term issues and cause you to upgrade care? Yeah, I kind of just went over that. Respiratory distress for more than 45 minutes. So the way I look at it, any injury that is life-altering causes me to escalate care. That is how we define the requirement for escalation of care. Any injury that either is or has the possibility to be life-altering. So we know as soon as we flush the eyes, they're going to start getting better, and we're going to see remarkable improvement with time. So that is not necessarily, most of the time, that is not going to be a life-altering injury. But respiratory distress, breathing in of itself, some people breathe only 20 times a minute. Super athletes breathe much slower than somebody who is severely obese. That's just the way we work. That's how our bodies are. We train our bodies to do different things. So somebody breathing slower is not necessarily a bad thing, but somebody that is not getting enough oxygen, by them breathing in their current state is not supplying the body enough oxygen, that might cause long-term injury. And that might be a life-altering injury. The lack of oxygen might be a life-altering injury, and that is something that we try to prevent. So we have a question: is there any way to monitor respiratory distress without a pulse oximeter? Yes, I would watch their chest rate, but then I really don't know the baseline from before the injury, so I don't know what their normal respiratory rate is. But keep in mind, if they have to think about breathing, they are definitely in respiratory distress. If there is any escalation of symptoms, if they get dizzy or lightheaded or nauseous, now we are definitely in a little bit more severe respiratory distress. If somebody is lightheaded and dizzy, they are not getting enough oxygen to their brain. And there's not much you can do. I know in the state of California, the average citizen does not carry oxygen. They cannot. State of California, I believe, requires a prescription to carry oxygen. So you cannot just give oxygen. And depending on how your local organization or how you feel about calling 911 and getting an ambulance, sometimes ambulances will not be allowed to come through. I've seen that happen more often than not. The ambulance crew is not allowed to come into the affected zone and wherever the civil rights action is going on. I don't understand the logic behind it, but I'm not going to argue against it because my argument is not going to go anywhere, but I'm just stating a fact. Even if you want to escalate to an ambulance, they might not come in. You might have to get this person and walk them to wherever the ambulance is going to be waiting, which is going to be 2 blocks away. But if somebody is telling you that they're lightheaded and dizzy, chances are they're not getting enough oxygen to their brain. And that needs to be taken care of because that is going, sooner or later, that's going to turn into a life-altering injury. So a couple of, one amazing tool that I've found, I'll put it up here on the screen. This is known as the elephant air washer. Now what I do with this is I snip it off right there, get a pair of shears and snip it off right there. I fill this either with saline or water, doesn't make a difference what you fill it with. Water will hold longer and water is cheaper. And with this, what you can do is you can deploy 1 or 2 drops of water into right next to somebody's eyes without a spray form. And then you don't have to get close to their face with a big bottle. This is a bottle. I have quite a few of these. The straw, I guess it's not a nozzle. It's more like the rubber hose. Okay, the rubber hose. It's about 6-8 inches. So you don't have a bottle right up against their face. You hold the bottle 3-4 inches away from their face, and with the other hand, you put the end about a quarter of an inch away from their eye, and you slightly squeeze the trigger enough to get some liquid to come out and supplement the tears. This is something you can use from one patient to the next. It's easier to control the flow, and it's less frightening to the person who's opening their eyes and sees a water sports bottle right, a quarter of an inch from their eye. This is less frightening. These cost about $5. I personally recommend these. And then what I do is I use this to do the initial flush for the first 90 seconds. And then I will give the person that was contaminated one of those 5 milliliter saline ampules and tell them 1 drop in each eye every 15 to 30 seconds. That is how I would do. And this, again, this is known as an elephant air washer. It's your choice. I just found this is not a spray. We do not want to use a spray bottle. A lot of people use water sports bottles. I have no objection to that. Water sports bottle is great. These are better because we can see how much water comes out, and we don't have a big ass water bottle a quarter of an inch from somebody's eyes. That in itself is frightening. So I'm going to ask all of you look into one of these and please get them. And no, I'm not getting a kickback. I'm sure there's other companies that make air wash bottles. This is just this is the one I happen to carry because I saw one of these years ago and I got it and I've had it ever since. But look up an air wash bottle and any one of those, this type of bottle with a hose like that will work. Just snip off with that flat surfaces to prevent you from putting the hose all the way into your ear. We have a question on the board. I'm an EMTB. Which diagnostics tools do you suggest carrying? So as an EMTB, I will tell you this right now, you are never going to diagnose in the field. You are going to treat signs and symptoms only. If you start diagnosing in the field, you're going to start losing your license and you're going to get written up by your supervisor. We don't diagnose. We treat signs and symptoms as we see them. That said, as an EMTB, if you are wearing your uniform, you are not practicing on the Good Samaritan law. You can give oxygen. I don't know which state you're in. I don't know if the state you live in, you can carry oxygen. State of California, you can't unless you're a healthcare professional or you have a prescription. But don't diagnose. You treat signs and symptoms. You put on a pulse ox. There's not much you can do for somebody who's SATs are not at 99, 98%. I mean, if their SATs at 90 or at 90, there's not much the average layperson on the street can do. If you're out there on the street as an EMTB and you carry oxygen and somebody's SATs are less than what ideal, or somebody's in respiratory distress, please give them oxygen and get them to a healthcare facility for escalation of care. But the best way to monitor oxygen levels, honestly, the only way really is pulse ox. Um, I personally wouldn't really worry about collapsed lungs, so I wouldn't use a stethoscope to listen to their lungs. They're going to have trouble breathing because they have chemicals, unless there's an underlying condition such as a projectile, which might have caused a collapsed lung. That is not going to be my primary concern. My primary concern is to get them to ventilate properly in and out without hyperventilating. Or if they have no underlying condition, I will try to calm them down to get them to stop hyperventilating. If they have underlying conditions such as asthma or emphysema, then we treat in conjunction with that, but that person will tell us. We always suspect that even if they don't tell us. So to answer your question and summarize, I would carry oxygen and a pulse ox. And anybody that has pulse SAT levels that are not ideal gets oxygen based on your training. Whatever your local protocols are. Again, I am not your medical director. You have your county medical director or whatnot, or your county SOP will dictate how much oxygen. We have a question. Do you sanitize the elephant air bottle I wash in between patients? No, it's not. It's never going to make contact with the patient. You don't. If one of the things I do is personally, I never use hand sanitizer. I have a hand sanitizer is 70%, minimum 70% alcohol. That's how it works. It's much easier and cleaner for me to get a 70% alcohol spray without putting all that gunk on my face, on my hands. That is, sorry, my hands. So what I do with that is I spray a little bit of alcohol on it between patients, and that's, if it's good enough for my hands, it's good enough for that. Plus, I never let that touch the person that I'm treating, ever, period. So you don't necessarily have to sanitize it. I do clean it with 70% alcohol because that'll evaporate. I can wipe that off if I need to, but most of the time it'll evaporate in mere seconds and I can move on. And again, all I'm trying to do is put 2 or 3 drops on the inner corner of their eye, both sides of the nose. That's all I'm trying to accomplish with that. There's no reason for us to touch the person's eyes with that air wash bottle. And that's one of the reasons I tend to ask people to sit on their hands, because I don't touch them either. Otherwise, I'd have to change gloves between each person. But I'm not going to touch. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get everybody's eyes starting to flush. No, I'm going to that, and that should take no longer than 10 seconds per person, because you have help. You're not there by yourself. You have help. You start the flushing process, then you immediately start looking at respiratory. Make sure that they are breathing properly and do not have any life-altering injuries. I mentioned earlier that I do documentation. I do not know how many of you know what a TCC is, but this is what's known as a TCC card. I carry this with me. I carry 100 of these every time I go out. I fill one out for everybody I make contact in, and I only use a first name. I never get any information, because when we go over to somebody, when we introduce ourselves, when hi, my name is XYZ, I'm trained in first aid, I'm going to help you. And that person is going to come back and say, oh yeah, my name is John. And I write down John. And here I start writing down information. The reason I write this down is if they need to go to a hospital, the hospital would greatly appreciate it if they have a history. And this person, because they were just contaminated by various chemicals, their mind is running a million miles a minute. They're undergoing a panic attack. They're anxious. They're hyperventilating. They still can't see right. They are not going to remember what time things happen. This is a great little document to fill out, as long as we respect privacy, meaning first name only. Even for people that do not need follow-up healthcare, I still give this to them, because I find it helps them as well as it helps the community if we let people know what we did to them and what time we did to them. We are part of the community, whether we practice healthcare or harm reduction or street medicine or street medic role, whatever the case may be. We helped somebody overcome an acute issue. Give them the documentation, self-empower them to the next day when they are calm, they had a good night's sleep, they will take a look at this and say, hey, a stranger who I have no idea, who didn't charge me a penny, helped me out yesterday when I was in need. And this is what he did to me, and this is how long it took, and this is where I was. And if tomorrow that person has a symptom show up and they decide to go to a doctor, they have documentation on what was done to them. These are somewhat prohibitively expensive. If you buy them online, chances are they will cost you $1 a piece. They are very, very expensive, dude. But you can print these out at home. You can just Google for Tactical Combat Casualty Care Card. It's published by the United States military. You can download the PDF, downsize it or right size it. The ones that you buy online are waterproof, that you can write on with a Sharpie that will stay and the Sharpie will absorb and never washes off. Those are the ones I get. I get them to the military and whatnot. But this is what most of you will not know NPA or CRIC or any of that. That's fine. Just write what you did do and give the documentation. We're here to self-empowerment. This helps a lot. We have a question. If somebody has their own albuterol inhaler and they're in respiratory distress after being assaulted by a chemical irritant, should they use it? They should use it because okay, as a paramedic, you can answer that question differently, but as a street medic, and remember, street medic is a role, you are practicing on the Good Samaritan. You are not being a paramedic on the street unless you're in uniform and you're willing to put your license on the line. So as a street medic, you are covered on the Good Samaritan. A doctor prescribed an inhaler to that person. You are not going to override a doctor's orders under any circumstances. That doctor and that person had a consultation. That doctor and that person discussed history and discussed possible side effects. They made a collective medical decision after doing some research that that person needs an inhaler to prevent life-altering injuries. I understand that there's a chemical that's being mixed in, which is why I stated earlier, if we can, we should prolong the use of an inhaler, but we will not override doctor's orders. Because if you override doctor's orders, what you are doing is you are practicing something called street medicine. As a paramedic, you cannot, under any circumstances, practice street medicine. That is not only against the law, it goes against every rule every moral you followed or you promised to follow when you went to paramedic school. We do not practice street medicine unless we are under direct supervision of a doctor. So